3 or 4 other firefighters were sitting at our station, and we were getting ready to leave, go home, and the call come out. They set a car in the field on fire. One of them got across on the radio and said, "Hey, we need a deputy out here. There's a girl out here that's been burned, standing in the road naked."
According to investigators, 19-year-old Jessica Chambers was inside her car when someone lit it on fire, but somehow, though injured, she miraculously got out of it. It was Saturday night, December 6, 2014, and her car was parked just off a rural road in Cortland, Mississippi. 2 men driving by saw the fire and called it in just after 8 p.m. Eddie Eidson, a volunteer firefighter at the time, was one of the first responders.
We pulled up, and I remember the heat coming off the truck. We started rendering medical aid for Jessica, and I remember looking down, and she was laid on her side, and they had this old army blanket covering. I mean, the only thing she had on was a pair of panties. Just seeing her laying on that ground, that piece of skin. Every time she breathed, go in and out her nose. Ain't a damn thing you can do about it. The burn spots were red. Looked like, in some places, maybe looked like somebody had smeared charcoal on her. She wasn't complaining about pain or nothing. You know, she was shaking. Somebody asked her, was she cold or something? And I seemed like she nodded her head. You know, she wasn't real talkative. And then firefighter, Brandy Davis, was kind of back over toward her feet. And he said, "Well, hon, who done this to you?" She kind of just looked up, turned her head just a little bit, and plain as day, she said, "Eric did this." She didn't call no last name. You know, she said, "Eric did this." We was all kind of stunned. I thought whoever did this may still be out there. Seeing her the way she was, and then still alive, and I don't wish this on my worst enemy. The ambulance had pulled up, unloaded the stretcher, and they loaded her up on it, and that was the last I seen of her.
Jessica would live only about 6 hours after those first responders arrived. She had 2nd and 3rd degree burns over 93% of her body. Her mother, Lisa, was with her in her final moments.
I held her hand as she took her last breath and told her it was okay. She could go. To quit fighting, and that Mama and Daddy were there. Of course, told her Daddy was a big old baby. He couldn't come in there. She knew that. There's nothing any worse than to tell your child they can go. You just have no idea the pain and guilt I feel for telling her she can go. But I know I couldn't have kept her here. There was no way.
The story of Jessica's horrific death went viral not just in Mississippi, but around the country. The question everyone was asking, who did this to Jessica and why? I'm your host, Beth Karras, and this is Unspeakable Crime, the Killing of Jessica Chambers. I was a prosecutor in New York City for 8 years before joining Court TV, now called True TV, as a correspondent. For almost 2 decades, I covered trials across the country. All murders are horrific, but the suffering this young woman experienced in the hours before she died is among the worst I've ever seen. I've been following Jessica's case for a long time, and I'm part of Oxygen's television series, Unspeakable Crime, the Killing of Jessica Chambers. This podcast series will cover the story of Jessica's brutal murder, the hunt for her killer, and the trial of the accused nearly 3 years later. The best place to start this deep dive into the story is the place where it happened. Jessica was from a small town in northern Mississippi called Cortland. It has a population of about 500 people. A.J. Prince is Jessica's sister.
Cortland is very small. It's just on the outskirts of Batesville, which also is very small. Most of everybody knows everybody. All the kids on our road, we all knew each other. We were all in someone's backyard at some point playing softball, baseball, kickball, basketball, just whatever we could find. We were usually all right there together, everybody. Drive down the road and the stranger on the street was waving at you as he mowed the yard. I mean, it was pretty close. And at some point, you talked to that person. It was never, oh, we have a new neighbor. You didn't hear from them. It was a, hey, how you doing?
Cortland is in Panola County, about an hour south of Memphis, Tennessee. Oxford, where Ole Miss is located, is a half hour to the east. Stephen Watley is from the Panola County Chamber of Commerce.
Like any small town, pretty slow pace. Panola County as a whole is a more blue-collar, industrial type area. Again, Cortland being one of our smaller towns in the county. Being in the Mississippi Delta, so farming is a huge thing. Huge farm community, lots of farmland. Being so close geographically to Memphis and Oxford and the coast even, in New Orleans, we do have a lot of industry, a lot of blue-collar, hard-working people here in Panola County. The mix would be probably more African American than Caucasian in that area. In Cortland, a lot of people do live below the poverty level, and that's not unusual for any small Delta town in the area. And I think it's an interesting fact about Batesville and Panola County, we have one of the highest per capita church populations in the country too. So a lot of black and white churches. So the tradition here is that the whites go to the white churches and blacks go to the black churches, and I don't think it's anything that's racial necessarily in our minds, it's just what we grew up doing. So I don't think it's anything that's we think through, it's just part of what we do.
In this Bible Belt region of the country, locals say their faith is at the forefront of their lives. Faith in football, that is. Here's District Attorney John Champion.
If you're here, you're either an Ole Miss Rebel or you're a Mississippi State Bulldog. But we also have our faith. And all of us that grew up, you went to the football games on Saturday, you had your fun, and then on Sunday morning you were in church, and it still holds that way. And, we're all firm believers in raising our children in churches and having that sense of faith to go along with your love for football.
South Panola High School, where Jessica attended, is known for pushing out great football players. Many attend colleges and universities on football scholarships, and more than one from this tiny region has made his way to the NFL. In fact, as of 2013, Panola County was the second highest county in Mississippi to send students to the NFL, 7, 6 from Jessica's high school. This is football country, and Jessica didn't just attend the games, she was a cheerleader. Jessica's sister AJ and her father Ben.
Younger version, Jessica loved to play softball. She played softball, I think she was probably about 12. I think when she hit 6th grade and tried out for the junior high cheerleading squad, softball kind of got put on the back burner, which was upsetting for me at first because softball was everything. And it was hard for me to see, like, you're giving that up? But when I went in and actually saw her, she made the cheerleading squad. And her first couple of practices, I was like in awe. Like, I couldn't believe that was a thing like that, and she absolutely loved it. Cheering, she loved it. And of course, she was so little and dainty. She was the flyer, which made me definitely have to go to practices because I was like, if she falls, if she gets hurt, I'm gonna be right there. But it was absolutely an awe moment watching her just fly.
Yeah, she was small, she was a flyer. They'd throw her up in the air, and it used to scare me. Oh, God, I was so afraid they were going to drop her. And they had dropped her before,
Though it had been a few years since Jessica was a cheerleader, when she died, it was those cheerleader images that permeated the media coverage. I remember seeing those photos and being haunted by what happened to her. She was so young, so beautiful, and I wondered who could have such evil in them to murder in the most gruesome way. And to make matters worse, No one knew who did this. I spoke to BuzzFeed reporter Katie Baker. The story and those cheerleader images also captured her attention.
When I found Jessica's story just reading news, and I saw that this girl had been burned alive in this town of 500 people and that nobody knew who had killed her. And I was immediately intrigued by that. Most Americans probably have never even heard of Cortland, the tiny town that Jessica's from. But because she died in this really gruesome way, and because she's white, blonde, beautiful, that's why her story took off. Millions of people around the country were reading about her.
Had you ever heard of something like this in your reporting in the South or anywhere?
No, I hadn't, and that is what drew me to the story. The way that she had been killed, which, as you said, was just so violent and seemed so personal, and then the fact that it seemed like everyone in her tiny town was a suspect is what drew me to the story originally. I thought, who would kill someone in such a horrific way, especially if they knew her? And then once I started looking into it and saw how it had interested other people for a variety of reasons, I think some people were drawn to the story because it was a white girl killed by what people thought were black men. I think that some people were drawn to it because of the awful way that she died, and I think that especially in 2015, it was the start of this interest in, true crime stories, and I think that it kind of had all the characteristics of a good murder mystery, as awful as that sounds, and I think that's why a lot of people were interested in it.
As Katie Baker quickly discovered, within days of Jessica's death, the mystery of her murder was being discussed on social media. Facebook pages were dedicated to solving the mystery of Jessica's murder. Postings included wild theories of who may have killed her and why. The more Katie read, the more she wanted to know.
I started looking online, seeing what I could find about it, and one of the first things I found was this Facebook page, Justice for Jessica, and I was looking online and I saw all of these rumors and theories about who had killed her. Was it her best friend? Was it her father? Was it her ex-boyfriend? Was it another ex-boyfriend? And then I saw those same people being accused writing back and defending themselves. And that's when I really became interested, because then it wasn't just this horrific murder mystery. It was more a story to me about a small town and what happens when the internet descends on this town and causes problems.
There were all sorts of people posting these theories, these armchair sleuths, weighing in on Jessica's murder and whodunit, as if they were experts on her case.
I saw that all of these people from all over the country, and in some cases even internationally, had become really obsessed with this murder case, and I thought that was really fascinating that these wannabe internet detectives had swooped into this tiny town and become really obsessed with this case. And then I noticed that these people were not just interested, but more or less terrorizing Jessica Chambers' friends and family members, interrogating them, asking them where they were the night of her death. And I thought, what's going on that this one tiny case in this tiny town has led to this international detective squad trying to solve her murder?
Did you reach out to any of these internet sleuths?
Yeah, I reached out to quite a few of them.
Were they responsive to you? Was there any merit to the kinds of things they were saying?
So at the time I wrote the story in 2015, nobody had been arrested for Jessica's murder, and definitely nobody brought up current alleged suspects. I heard really outlandish theories, and I can't say that I thought any of them were true or that any of these internet sleuths were doing a good job.
Scott Sproul is one of the internet sleuths Katie interviewed. He said he first heard about Jessica's story on Facebook, then stayed connected to it through Justice for Jessica, a site started by Jessica's sister, AJ. Here's part of her Skype interview with him.
And is this something you do a lot, kind of try to investigate cases you see out there, even though you're not in the area?
Yes, I don't know why it took a personal twist, where I just felt so bad for her that she was burned to death, and it almost captivated your attention. being burned to death. That's so it's horrendous. I can't even imagine. And that's why I think the main thing was, to me, is who did it. I mean, it had to have been an animal. There was a lot of conversation on Justice with Jessica, and that was excellent the first year. But then it started to become really racist, and people were pointing fingers and blaming. And I got out of it. I just couldn't take it anymore. You know, you can make things factual, or you can make it racist. And I had no time for the racism. I got out. And that's when I went into Facebook and just started looking at people's profiles, who they're friends with, and then so on and so forth. And you can really pick up a lot of pieces.
Scott Sproul was one of many who posted theories online about who killed Jessica, dug up stories about her past, as well as the past of her family, friends, and anyone who spoke about the crime. He was also one of many who were very critical of the investigation, which at the time seemed to be going nowhere. Here's more of Katie's interview with him.
You're in Canada, right? So you're pretty far away from Mississippi.
I'm far.
Well, how are you able to investigate the case? How do you look online for clues that you feel have led you to find a suspect better than the law enforcement here in Mississippi and here in Batesville?
It was just strictly digging through Facebook, really.
Wow.
Janice Broach, WMU-TV reporter, covered the case from the beginning. She said social media really took its toll on the small-town community and on Jessica's family and friends.
It got really, really crazy, especially on social media. I was getting information through Facebook, and people were saying, I know this person did it, and here's why. It was drug dealers. You didn't even really have to know the people in this community, which I didn't, to know that these things sounded outlandish and couldn't really be true. And they were pointing fingers at everyone, including Jessica Chambers' father.
At the time of Jessica's death, her father, Ben, was working at the sheriff's department. But he also had a criminal past, and for the internet, that was enough to make him suspect number one.
Well, he did have in his past, there were some issues with drugs, and there was a drug conviction. And so they're saying, look to the father. A lot of them said, look at her father. He's the one who did it. They obviously had no information who did it, but they did say that he did it and to look at the father.
Here's Jessica's father, Ben Chambers, and his response to the online accusations.
It bothered me a lot, but hey, words don't bother me. As long as they saying it out there, like, they don't say it to my face, But one time, then we're gonna have a problem. But as long as somebody's saying something about me, I don't care what they say about me. I know in my heart I didn't hurt nobody. And the people that matters around me know I didn't hurt nobody.
Here's District Attorney John Champion.
None of us ever believed that Ben had a thing to do with it. That was strictly social media rumor and things like that. And Ben was never really looked at as a suspect at all.
The attacks on Jessica's father, Ben, were relentless, particularly online, but also in his community. Not only was he an online suspect in his daughter's murder, he was repeatedly called a racist. It's true, though, that Ben did not approve of Jessica dating black guys.
I'm not a racist. I got just as many black friends and Mexican friends as I do whites. But I don't believe in mixed relationships. Ain't nothing wrong with them, don't get me wrong. They more than welcome to come to my house anytime, but that's just the way I feel. The way I was growing up, I don't believe in that.
Another online suspect was Allie Allison. His family owns the M&M convenience store in Cortland. It turned out to be one of the last places Jessica was seen alive. Allison discovered the store's surveillance cameras had captured video of Jessica about 2 hours before she was found burned, and he turned it over to investigators. But for the online sleuths, that made him and the store prime targets for harassment.
All right, that store where Allie Allison and I worked, M&M, where the video was, where the last place Jessica Chambers was seen, people kept saying, that's a place where drug deals are done. Just go there, you will see all of these drug deals. We were there on different days, at different times. All we saw were older people sitting in trucks talking, and nothing was exchanged, nothing behind the store where people said that's where all the drug deals happen. It was just a place where everyone could go and buy a few things to eat, basically.
Janice Broach interviewed Allison.
He was a really nice kid, and I talked to him quite a few times. He was trying to be very helpful. When they came to the store, he showed them the video. There apparently was a little section that's missing, apparently through no one's fault, no one doing anything nefarious to make that disappear, but that's what the people in social media were saying. They said awful things about him. He's Middle Eastern descent, so they started saying things about that.
That's where he did it. They accused him of committing the crime, even though no one had any evidence of that. And obviously at this point, they finally had to say, the DA, John Champion, and the Sheriff's Department had to say, Allie Allison is not a suspect. He's the only one that they said was not a suspect because he was getting death threats, and they had to come out and say that.
Did his parents own the store or something?
I believe they did, yes, more than one, but not in that Cortland area. Yes, or his family did. I don't know if it was his parents, but his family did, and that's why he was there. He worked a lot of hours, was someone that you would have wanted in that community because he was very friendly, but they ran him out of town.
Allie Allison said he was just trying to help in Jessica's investigation when the tide on social media turned against him. The online community turned up all kinds of information about anyone and everyone in Jessica's life, including Jessica herself. She was called a drug user, a gang member, a victim of domestic abuse, and much was made of small brushes she had with the law. Investigators and friends told our producers Jessica was never in a gang, but that didn't stop her from being raked over the online coals. BuzzFeed investigative reporter Katie Baker.
I do a lot of reporting on small towns across the U.S., and what I saw in Jessica was nothing different from the other teenage girls in small towns that I see. She was troubled. She was figuring out who she was and what she was all about, and I think it's really tragic that she didn't get to grow up and become an adult, but I don't think that at 19 she was doing anything out of the ordinary for a typical 19-year-old girl.
Jessica's sister, AJ.
Social media was horrific. It was definitely a sight to see. There were a lot of times I had to take a break from social media just because of the things that were being said. And I mean, there were things from her parents had it done because they're racist. There were things that me or my brother done it because we didn't agree with who she was dating. There was, she deserved it because she was dating a black guy. There was so many negative things that she wasn't a good person. She deserved every bit of it. There was so much stupidity that it was hard to be on social media for the longest.
It's perhaps who Jessica dated that impacted the online community the most. Katie Baker.
So Jessica was white, and she dated a lot of black guys, and for that reason, a lot of conservative bloggers and commenters became really obsessed with her case because they wanted to prove that her murder was tied to black gang activity in the area. And I think it had less to do with concern about Jessica and her family and more to do with promoting their racist agenda.
They kept saying, black people did it, and then they'd say, no, white people did it. And that just kind of made a little chaos in Batesville.
Made a little war in a way, against each other. Like, we were going against each other on social media.
Those were Jessica's friends Leslie Hall and Taylor Eggleston. Jessica's friend and neighbor Ashunta Winfield agrees.
After the case, people started taking sides. People started putting out their own opinions, who they thought did it, who they thought were capable of doing it, who they thought wasn't, It was just a whole bunch of stuff that shouldn't have ever happened. It was mostly people that weren't even from here that had the most to say about Cortland and Batesville, because before then, it was racism. It was a little, things that would happen here and there, but it was never anything as big as this, where people come from different states and voice their opinion about little small Batesville when they really knew nothing about the town.
Jessica's friends said they even joined in with the online melee because they were frustrated with what they were seeing. Her friend Ashanta.
I definitely did because I didn't like the way that they were trying to portray her because she never seen color. So she would probably be really mad about the fact of how it separated, how people became so separated, because Jessica loved everybody. She'd never seen a color in a person. So how they tried to say that the people that she were with were bad people, when if she was here to say, she would probably be really mad at the people talking about the people that she hung with.
As Katie Baker witnessed the online horror show, she decided to meet those most affected by the case firsthand. She went to Mississippi to get to the heart of the story. What did you find out?
Well, when I went to Cortland, Mississippi, and I met Jessica's mom, Lisa, I walked in and she was sitting there on a computer that someone she had met online had actually sent her so she could keep in touch with them all of the time, and she was responding to message after message and Facebook chats, and some of the messages were really awful. They were some of them were attacking her for being a bad mother, some of them were just spreading rumors about Jessica's family and Jessica's life, but Lisa really relied on the support of these people online because she hadn't heard any updates about the case and she was still grieving her daughter's murder. And I thought that relationship that she had with these internet sleuths, this kind of codependent relationship, was really interesting.
You did meet with Lisa. Did you meet with Ben Chambers, Jessica's father?
Yeah, I met with both Lisa and Ben Chambers, and I met with a number of Jessica's friends and family.
And your impression of her family, her friends, and sort of the life she led?
I don't think I can sum that up in a sentence. I mean, I think that one of the bizarre things about being made into a headline is that people think that they know who you are, what your family's about. And I think that Jessica's life is complicated. I heard from her ex-boyfriend's family that her parents were extremely racist. I heard from other people that her parents were very loving and very kind. You know, Jessica's not around to tell us what she thinks, but I think both are probably true. I think that, you know, people contain multitudes, and again, I didn't get the sense. I didn't think that her parents had murdered her, or, you know, had done anything to cause her to be killed. But, you know, like many families, they were imperfect, complicated people.
Do you think that the internet, the online community, contributed to dividing the community in Cortland and Panola County?
I definitely think that. I think that it was really fascinating to me how these strangers were causing these arguments to play out in real time between people who had known each other for years by digging up all of these rumors. And I mean, I think that a lot of people told me that they felt that the internet sleuths were dividing the town, and that everyone in the town was grieving for Jessica, and nobody was fighting with each other until it became kind of an internet sensation. That's what people told me at the time, at least.
Months into the new year, early 2015, the police investigation into Jessica's death was continuing, but there was still no arrest. No answer to the questions everyone was asking. Who did this to Jessica and why? Jessica's death was horrific and shocking and needed to be solved.
I'm Dennis Darby. I was the sheriff during the murder of Jessica Chambers. This one, it was personal because Ben Chambers, the father of Jessica, was an employee here at the sheriff's office for working as a mechanic. This was a lengthy investigation. It went on for months and months and months.
Darby's deputies, along with state and federal investigators, set up a task force to find who was responsible for Jessica's death. Here's Sheriff Darby and a group of his deputies in the Panola County Sheriff's Department. They all worked the Chambers case.
You had a group of the best investigators in the world sitting around this table to help get this case solved.
The FBI, the DA, and ATF.
We probably interviewed 30 or 40 different suspects that night. You had several of the firemen initially that said they heard her say Eric or Derek. I mean, we interviewed everybody in the town of Cortland and the surrounding area by the name of Eric or Derek.
We did, at least 2 weeks.
Everybody.
Eric and Derek in Panola County.
Yeah. Panola County Sheriff Department lead investigator Barry Thompson.
There were numerous officers on the scene that night. I was actually out of town the first night. I was constantly on the phone with one of these guys just talking and seeing what they saw. The crime scene in and of itself was the vehicle was obviously had an accelerant placed on it. It burned very hot, which left basically no evidence in the car. Like I said, everybody was there. The fire department sprayed everything down, so it was basically a mud wash after it was over with. It was a very low lit, it's a rural area. There was nothing. The car provided very little, if anything, to us. Of course, at that time, Jessica was still alive, and the main concern was getting as much from her as we could. She was talking at the crime scene. Most of her conversation was unintelligible at best. We were able to figure out who she was from her conversation, but that was about it. She was airlifted to the med, the burn unit, and I guess she died 4 or 5 hours later. They called me about 1:30 or 2 o'clock and told me that they had pronounced her dead at the med. As far as suspects, I mean, when you mentioned to a suspect that he was a suspect in her death, the response was one like I'd never seen before, that they were adamant they had nothing to do with the death of Jessica Chambers. And most of them would tell you straight out, if I was going to kill somebody, I'd kill them, but there's no way I could do this to somebody. And that stood out through this whole investigation. And people in this case actually came to us. We didn't have to go to them. They were forthcoming with information, and be it whether they were gang members. That's why I said this case had nothing to do with gangs or per se drugs. I mean, we had people that had been on the opposite side of the law that would come in and give us information, at least try to help get this case solved, and that was very important. We had an outpouring from citizens from every walk of life coming in wanting to help with this case.
Lieutenant Ed Dixon was on the scene the night Jessica was found burned.
It's one of those cases where you didn't really have time to go home and go to sleep. You slept in your office or one of the other guys' office. You ate lunch here, you slept here, because you spent countless hours trying to figure out what went on and what you don't miss and what you didn't miss. And you go back over and over again, and you miss something, and then you start, you backtrack, and it's a lot, countless hours spent trying to get to the bottom of this case. It was a very, very sensitive case, very sensitive. The nature of the case is nationwide. It was something that we were determined to solve and figure out what happened here. We wasn't going to rest until we figured out. There's a lot of cases go unsolved, but we put a lot of manpower hours into it. We worked together as a team effort, so that took us a long way.
The police work would face lots of scrutiny. We'll discuss that further in other episodes. But as the months passed, a reward for information leading to the arrest of Jessica's killer grew from $11,000 to $54,000, and still nothing. Jessica's mother, Lisa.
The reward was high, but the streets were quiet. They could have been because all you hear out of people is snitches end up in ditches, or it could also have been because nobody else knew.
Jessica's sister AJ on the family's frustration.
I didn't really know the things that were going on, the things that they were doing, because I wasn't informed of it. So to me, they didn't do enough. And with each passing day, it was just a little bit harder. Like, are they ever gonna catch this person? Like, do they know? Do they even have an idea? Where are we at with it? And I was never told anything. And it was hard. I prayed morning, noon, and night for an arrest. It's hard to believe that in a situation like that, my sister would ever get peace, knowing that if this monster isn't behind bars, or that it could happen to someone else. So I can't imagine my sister ever being at peace until there was justice. And she very much deserves justice.
Running out of leads, the investigation into Jessica's murder seemed to go cold. Then, 14 months after that tragic night, an arrest. And it's someone nobody expected. Next time on Unspeakable Crime, the killing of Jessica Chambers. Jessica's mother, Lisa, is told there is a suspect in custody.
He told us that they had made an arrest, that we would all come in there the next morning, I think, and that's when they were making the indictment. If he was found guilty, I will never forgive him. I hope he burns in hell for all eternity. I do. I don't care. If he killed my daughter, he deserves it.
Unspeakable Crime, The Killing of Jessica Chambers is produced by Wilshire Studios for Oxygen Media. I'm your host, Beth Karras.
Okay, once you pass